to smooth piano jazz, night jazz, Los Angeles jazz. And you're listening to Mark Kulak, Housatonic.Live, on a Friday afternoon, April 4th, 2025, and it is 3:35 p.m., 3:35 in the afternoon. Mark Kulak doing a little live stream from the corner of a bedroom in my house in Southborough, Massachusetts. About 30 miles or so from Boston. 30 miles, 30 minutes. It can take anywhere from 25 minutes to 2 hours to get to Boston, so I never know how to say that. And you're listening to episode 1221 of Housatonic.Live. Full episodes. I don't count video shorts, and I don't count videos I've shared. And you don't need an introduction to me or the show. But I did call today's episode, We Finally Have an Ally. We finally have an ally in talking and getting the word out about getting the sunlight on the career of Dr. Joshua Lederberg. Finally. Dr. Joshua Lederberg, the American molecular biologist. He has so many different titles. And I think, unlike some, they were mostly pretty genuine. Is, although maybe not from a bench perspective, the most prominent, but I would say there is no scientist who is more important to know the history of and to understand if you really want to have an accurate representation of the advancement of the understanding of the human genome of the last 80 or so 100 years of what has been happening with molecular biology and so many of these other scientific disciplines. If you're thinking about, my goodness, what Lederberg did was he bridged the gap between diplomat and politics and policy and being a scientist. And he was a prominent scientist on top of it. He received his first Nobel at 33 years old. And I don't think it's because it was given to him for free. And this is, I'm closing in on 6 full years of my program. I easily have 5.5 years in right now. And I have probably more show titles with the word Lederberg in it than just about probably any other program out there. And I've known that by not using clickbait titles regularly. I mean, obviously, I use clickbait titles sometimes. I mean, it's a desperate attempt to get something. But by sticking to my guns and trying to say the names and the concepts and the events which have mattered the most, at least as far as I've deemed the most important or have found to be the most insightful, it's definitely hurt the visibility of my program, and that's okay. That's okay. Why, if I just drifted into the same topic that everyone else seemed to be highlighting, then what's the point? Even if I get more visibility, why would I be wasting my life doing that? That's already work that's covered elsewhere. And it's nice that over the last several weeks, Jonathan Cooey of GigaOhm Biological he's been slowly realizing it, but the work of Joshua Lederberg is more than, I've been interested in it primarily from the policy perspective. But Lederberg did not get to the position where that he had regarding, for example, after the events of 9/11, the head of the United States Department of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, launched it's loosely described as an internal investigation, a classified internal investigation of which we only know existed. And the person who was was appointed to run that investigation was Joshua Lederberg. I know because of I've been highlighting how significant the drug epidemic is, and of course how it's impacted our family. How much addiction in the United States starts off with opioids, starts off with people receiving pain meds, more powerful pain meds than they ever needed for perhaps a dental procedure or something like that. And this book here was written by David Radden Keefe, and it's titled Empire Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. And the Sackler family, Sackler, and the company which they pretty much own, Purdue Pharma, was what brought OxyContin to market and made it probably more available than just about any other company out there. Synthetic opioids embedded within other, anti-inflammatories and pain meds and so on. And I forget how I did this tangent, but the Raymond Sackler of the Purdue Pharma family was among the best friends. He spoke at Lederberg's funeral. He was one of the 2 or 3 people who gave the eulogy, for heaven's sakes. Just because 2 people are together in a photograph shaking hands doesn't mean anything. But when someone speaks at someone's funeral, that's important. Okay, when you're like the best man or something like that, or in a woman's case, the what does he call it? The bride of honor. I can't even remember the phrase anymore. Maid of honor. That's a big deal. I try not to highlight just, hey, look at these people in this photo. Obviously, everything's connected. Anyways, this book here, talking about the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma, somehow omits the word Lederberg. And I don't know how that happened, because the Sackler Foundation was run by Joshua Lederberg. The Purdue Pharma family appointed Lederberg. So I've been on a long journey since I first discovered Joshua Lederberg, and I'm going to take a moment to highlight why Jonathan is highlighting Joshua Lederberg right now, Jonathan Cooey of GigaOhm Biological. And then I'm just going to quickly review how I came to discover Joshua Lederberg. I'm definitely within I don't want to say within a community, but I'm definitely in a world where there are many other programs and blog posts and so on, influencers and researchers and book writers, etc., who are all tagline is trying to find the truth, trying to figure out what happened with major events which seem unsolved, or we only know a part of the truth as everyday people, everyday citizens. In my case, the United States, but could be people in other parts of the world. And I've noticed that effectively nobody, aside from now Jonathan Cooey, will ever mention Joshua Lederberg. Nobody. Now, there are thousands of people have been involved in this world of genetics and researching human genome and virology, and it's certainly, all things being equal, it's impossible to suggest. I mean, not impossible to suggest, but it would be impossible standard that every person in this magnificent collection of disciplines of people that have participated in the advancement of the human genome and all of the concerns about the advancement of biotechnology, etc. It would be impossible standard for every other blog post and researcher out there to mention every name. I mean, obviously, that's not possible. And I'm not asking that. What I am suggesting, though, is how is it possible that no one mentions Lederberg? Nobody. It's sort of, and it would be sort of like trying to talk about the Kennedy assassination and never mentioning Oswald. There's thousands of programs out there. It feels as though they're trying to understand virology and the vaccines and what pharma's doing, but no one will mention Lederberg. Nobody. Sometimes I've actually had to look myself in the mirror and go, well, first, damn, you're good looking. But second of all, how is it possible? What's wrong? What am I missing? Am I really just delusional and thinking that just because he's involved in all of these things that Lederberg was really as important as he was? It's actually caused me to really reconsider, what the heck am I doing? What do I got wrong? So I'm going to go over in a few minutes how I discovered Lederberg and then highlight his career yet again. The reason why Jonathan Cooey has rediscovered Lederberg is, well, first of all, he trusts my research, and if I try to suggest that something is important, or let's just put it this way, if something keeps coming up a lot, if you keep rolling the dice and you're getting two twos all the time, at some point you have to go, maybe the dice are loaded. There must be a reason behind this. And for Lederberg to have kept coming up so often, and in books that I'm playing the audiobook right now, it's got to be a reason. And let's just go over some of the details here. And this is just the video spreadsheet. Get back to that some other time. Come on. Why would I want to go solo? I don't. Boy. Thing got confused. Okay. Let's look at... in Lederberg's Wikipedia page, the thing that he discovered when he was 33 years old, when he won the 1958 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, for discovering that bacteria can mate and exchange genes, bacteria conjugation. So what's bacteria conjugation? Bacteria conjugation, bacteria are single-celled organisms, is the transfer of genetic material between bacteria cells by direct cell-to-cell contact or by a bridge-like connection between the two cells. This takes place through a pilus. It is a parasexual mode of reproduction in bacteria. It is a mechanism of horizontal gene transfer, as are transformation and transduction, although these other mechanisms do not involve cell-to-cell contact. So transformation here in molecular biology is the genetic alteration of a cell resulting from the direct uptake and incorporation of exogenous genetic material from its surroundings through the cell membranes. In other words, there are methods that genetic information can be exchanged between bacterium, and there are many cases where these will use a things called transduction, which is effectively the use of a bacteria-specific virus to exchange information. Or this is one way that bacteria can facilitate sexual reproduction. So you could view it as very specific to bacteria reproducing, but this bacteria-specific thing is called which is a virus, is called a bacteriophage, which just happens to be the most abundant biological entity on the planet. There are, I think, 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more bacteriophages on the planet than there are grains of sand on all the beaches, or something crazy like that. If you added all bacteria, all mammals, everything together, and what would that number be? You would still have a number that's like 1/1,000,000th the total, or something like that, of all bacteriophages. So bacteriophages are the dominant biological entity on the planet. And although they perform many purpose uses, they are used for many things and have many applications. At the very least, they are used to exchange genetic information between cells. And bacteriophage is a little bit like, it's like the virus of the bacteria world, except the viruses of the human world are much more fragile, usually because, similar to phages, we just call them phages, similar to bacteriophages or phages, they exchange information between cells of the usually a multi-celled organism. This is human viruses or exosomes. So, very simply put, early on in the pandemic, all of these virus experts popped up on the internet. And people saying that viruses don't exist. And there were many fiery arguments, and it never really got anywhere, and you had to take a side. And what I saw by looking at this simple concept was that there are, at the very least, virus-like entities. Perhaps most virus-like entities, they're not really alive. They're simply a way to exchange information between cells or between bacterium or so on. And yes, sometimes they can play a role in cell death or bacteria death, etc., or sexual reproduction. So the whole internet was ablaze, and people saying all viruses are bad, they're made in laboratories, they come out of bat anuses and caves and kill people, gain of function, Nazis, etc. And another side, like, no, they're all made up. Viruses just don't exist. That's it. It's all a fantasy. And as someone, I worked in the computer industry for a long time, and I just looked at it, and I'm like, okay, so maybe this doesn't explain all viruses, but certainly a lot of them, probably most of them, right off the bat, I could see they are serving the purpose of exchanging information. It's a communication mechanism. It's so simple. And I couldn't understand why other people weren't seeing this. Anyway, so through this and other research that Jonathan has done really over the last several years right now, not to mention the fact of his career coming into where he is, it's become clear that phages are obviously it's the dominant biological entity, but also most of what we observe, most of what we research regarding viruses and even DNA manipulation comes down to bacterium and bacteriophages. And when you see that entities such as CRISPR involve phages, when you see that you can't study viruses without using bacterium and phages, when you want to study tissue regrowth, you're using phages. There's this whole world, all of this fear mongering about, monkey viruses and everything else. So much of it is done studying and using phages. 1 second here. So from there, you start to revisit many concepts of biology. And Jonathan, having been in the world of children's health defense, of studying all of these, or working with and being amongst all of these fakes who are studying things such as, we need safer vaccines, etc. And you see the fakes such as an Andrew Wakefield, etc., talking about the gut biome. It just leads to digging in more on bacteria and phages, and then you realize the gut is actually designed to be permeable by phages. And then you realize that mitochondria, those little entities in cells which have their very own DNA, are actually remnants of what used to be their very own world of bacterium, probably in constant communication through phages with the bacteria in your gut. And you start to see all of these systems popping up. And there's so many biological machines or phenomenons whose explanation seems to be always a little bit half-assed, that things start to fall into place more and more when you become aware of the enormity of the world of bacterial communication and phages and the interplay, the symbiosis between that and the human body. Bacteriophages are just not mentioned, similar to Joshua Lederberg never being mentioned. Bacteriophages are also never mentioned. There's no illness caused by a bacteriophage. If you look on Twitter, just go through the videos, search for bacteriophages in humans. You'll find, well, first and foremost, yes, they just happen to be the predominant biological entity of the human body. 10 times more than all the bacterium in your body, which would make sense because there's multiple one of these communication entities per bacterium cell. So, of course, it's going to be a larger number. And a new biology is now forming. But the new biology that Jonathan is showing is not something that he's creating necessarily. And I mean this in the most sincere way possible. In fact, one of the reasons why it will be more and more difficult, as Jonathan Cooey himself said today, to respond to his work, is because he's starting to lean more and more than ever on the work of the giants that brought us this world of molecular biology. If someone wants to take on the statements, many of the statements that Jonathan made today, they don't have to argue Jonathan. They have to argue Joshua Lederberg. Again, someone else that no one wants to mention. Let's go back to talking about, I don't know, maybe the pyramids were made by space aliens and they contain parasites in the foundations, and parasites go around the world and cause cancers so that people can be enslaved to the space aliens through the Epstein cult or something like that, right? You got to make up something like that. That's where it goes. Let's not talk Joshua Lederberg. Let's not talk phages. Let's not talk transduction. Let's not talk any of this stuff. Let's just stay to conspiratorial sounding, I don't know, weapons of mass destruction type stuff. So Jonathan Cooey's work is going to be deadly. And I mean this in a very good way. Because of the of building on this. And I want to see if I can it was odd. As you guys know, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube that are not scientific. Okay, I take plenty of breaks, and I mean I watch a lot of videos that are based upon Legos, a lot of videos about concrete construction, movies. I love watching stuff talking about movies. And let me show you a video that came across my my feed today. Okay. It is from a channel called MovieWise, and today's episode on MovieWise was the person who puts it together, okay, actually talking about great movie quotes.
I just don't want to get killed for lack of shooting back.
Great movie quotes in movies that you don't know about. So let's listen to the first one.
It looks like a fist wrapped in blood. Go
I'll start with one of my favorite dialogue scenes of all time, from that movie so famous for its words, Ben-Hur. Well, it should be. The uncredited writers are the quill. In this scene, our protagonist, whose name I don't remember, rejects being made a Roman citizen by Pontius Pilate because Rome has done nothing but screw up his life and his loved ones. Pilate presents his own no-nonsense worldview, that greatness, i.e. Rome,
where there is greatness,
will have faults that are also great.
error also is great.
And PP delivers this absolute banger.
The grown man knows the world he lives in, and for the present, the world is Rome.
Eyebrow raise for effect. Damn great line.
There you go. There's a line. A grown man knows the world he lives in, and for the present, the world is Rome. This is from Ben-Hur. I've never actually watched Ben-Hur. I should watch it, even if it's not my speed, just for historical reasons. A grown man knows the world he lives in, and for the present, the world is Rome. Now let's listen just to the rest of the dialogue here.
An entire philosophy in one epigram. I've always found this line the greatest pragmatic advice I've ever heard in a movie. I wish I knew who exactly wrote it. If I know old Hollywood trivia, everyone here would claim he did. Growing up is accepting that the nature of things is out of your control, and you can only act inside the world you do have.
The nature of things is out of your control, and you can only act inside of the world that you do have.
Perfect freedom has no existence.
It's easy to misread it as give up, conform.
Yep, exactly. Easy to misread it as give up and conform.
Change plutôt tes désirs que l'ordre du monde.
Many may find it demoralizing, but I think it's liberating. It gives ambition not a limit, but a name. You can't tear down Rome in one sweep and build utopia, but you can understand Rome's laws and rules and act inside them. The greatest men are not the ones who revolutionize existence, but those who learn how to play the games that do exist.
The grown man knows the world he lives in, and for the present, the world is Rome.
And a grown man
There's even
it's a compliment. It means someone the adult. I've talked about before how I struggled when I left my job, and I did leave my job. I had to conform a little bit more, and I had a situation where I had some colleagues, that one in particular that was not was just doing things idiotically, but he was a kiss up, and I was never really a kiss up, so I never really played politics. Anyways, I could have stayed in my job. I was not let go of my last job. I've been let go before, twice actually, but I was not let go of my last job. I chose to leave, which means no package or anything like that. But one of the amongst other reasons why I chose to leave was because I felt as though I needed to start do what I'm doing right now full time. Now this was 2019 summertime, and you could probably find a Periscope out there where I actually was saying that I believed that the research that I've done at that time and the content and was I needed to support it more because Trump was worth fighting for. That's what I said. That's what I thought. And I can't change that. But that's the truth. But I could have, and of course, doing anything like that is going to be very unpopular, staying within a large tech company. Most tech companies are, let's just say, do not appreciate anything, much less politics, about that particular position of mine that I just stated. Now, I could have just been the adult and just kissed up and maybe kept doing my little thing on the side, etc., and I would have had all my benefits and, a healthy salary and everything else. And I actually, I struggled because I kept thinking that if I could stay within a large company, maybe slowly over time through influence and so on, I could nudge things. Maybe, I don't know, I could keep doing my research on the side and then maybe, win some political favor inside the company and then maybe suggest that, I don't know. Again, I'm just telling you what I thought at the time. That certain maybe worldviews or I don't know were worth considering. We should have more tolerance for people across the political spectrum. I don't know. But I could have done that. And I still wonder if maybe it was weak of me to just not, bite my lip and stay in the company. Certainly, I'm sure that there's a lot of other people there that bite their lip because they need to pay the mortgage, to put their kids through college or whatever, even though they don't like it. A lot of people do that in the corporate world. I felt as though I had so much that I needed to do and was unique that it was necessary to step out that I just wouldn't be able to nudge enough people inside of a big company. Anyways, I bring this up because you need to be a real grown-up. You need to be tough in order to see the world as it is, okay? And know that sometimes the way that you can change it for the better is to bite that lip hard till it bleeds and work in the system as it is and manage it and improve it or stop it from getting worse. I believe that there are quite a few people who are in the system at multiple levels who know a lot more than you think they do. And maybe no one knows. Maybe they actually live a life of somewhat isolation because they can't tell anyone what they know. I think that actually happens more than when we think. I think there's people that go to the grave not knowing, even what their own family not even knowing what they had to go through. I think that actually happens a lot, sadly. And I try to remain very empathetic about it. And when I first started doing my research, I would find individuals or scientists or political leaders, business persons who had many contacts with many organizations or technologies or topics that were scary. And I would immediately just conclude that people who had a lot of contacts were bad people. It's a very simple way of thinking. And I was wrong to do that. Initially, when I bumped into Lederberg, and I will tell you how that came about, and again in a few moments. I just saw him on all of these papers and all of these groups and all these projects, and I was like, holy cow, this is not good. Now, as I did videos about Joshua Lederberg early on, I kept believing that, wow, I found this scientist who, with all of these diplomatic connections, all of these scientific connections, all of these mentorships, and I don't notice anyone in mainstream media, currently anyways, much less independent media, citizen media, ever mentioning him. He just doesn't exist. So I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be a win. I'm going to bring this, I'm going to raise awareness of Joshua Lederberg. And, of course, I just assumed at the time that he must be a bad actor, right? Because he worked on this, he knew these people, and so on and so forth. And, a month went by, and then multiple months went by, and then before you know it, it's been 5 years since I first did a video, I believe, with Joshua Lederberg in a title. And no one mentioned it. And this is, you go through this process of, why is that? Well, initially, because of my stubbornness, I'm still in the world of, well, he must be a bad actor, and I don't know, maybe some people are protecting him or something like that. I don't know. It just didn't make sense. It never made sense. Now I see it's because I think Lederberg was the adult, and I think that he knew he didn't just have a command of the subject matter material. He was the subject matter material. And he is a rare breed of an adult that could bridge the gap between working in the lab and being a scientist and understanding public policy, military policy, global policy, and and be connected with all of the interests behind the human genome. I think that he was a rare bird in that sense. And he knew that the world was Rome, and you could just stand up and start complaining about it and say that you don't like it and how unjust it is, but you're just going to disappear. You're going to be drowned out. There needs to be someone, and this is a rare person with his talents and capabilities, that sees the world as it is and goes, okay, so how do we work with this? Because it's not going to change anytime soon, right? I mean, you could see the ship heading towards the iceberg, and you could be like, this is terrible. We shouldn't be hitting icebergs. But the iceberg's happening. What can you do to maybe nudge the ship one way or the other? and have it work out best for the most people, for the most people possible. I know that maybe that's not the best analogy, but you have to be the adult. And I see everything that Lederberg did right now as him being the adult, a rare adult. And again, it even further highlights that nobody will mention him. Not even in just a bad way. Nothing. And it's only going to get worse because Lederberg is so important. I believe the order is out to never mention him. It simply connects too many things. It connects people that are in the public eye right now still, even though Lederberg's been dead for, 16-something years. It's just not acceptable. It's amazing. And now that Lederberg's work, and I'm going to mention Lederberg's wife also, was so foundational in so many things. So much of the Human Genome Project itself is made possible by bacteriophages, by the research of Lederberg. How many people talk about Kary Mullis, the hero who spoke out against Fauci, and his invention of the PCR? Kary Mullis never would have been known by anybody if it wasn't for Joshua Lederberg. I think Joshua Lederberg found Kary Mullis at a conference. He found this guy, handsome, blonde hair, blue-eyed, likes to surf, definitely technically competent. And I believe Lederberg used Mullis as a way to launder, to provide PCR to the world. I mean, and that's just one example. That's just one of a massive list of things that Lederberg was involved in. I thought that with so many people so enthusiastically talking about Dr. Kary Mullis, who passed in 2019. Maybe he was murdered. Maybe they gave him the flu. I don't know. PCR. He spoke out against Fauci. Let's talk Mullis. Hey, you never, and I would say, you never would have heard of Mullis if it wasn't for Lederberg. And nothing but crickets. People would run away from me. They would run away from me. Oh, my goodness. There must be a way that we can go back to talking about Mary's Monkey and Lee Harvey Oswald. We can't be talking about Lederberg for even a minute. People are going to realize that everything they thought about virology is a sham. And although Lederberg never says it like that, if you really, really, really read between the lines carefully and know that he has to be the adult who knows the world that he lives in, and the third line, and for the present, Lederberg knew the world is this way now. It doesn't mean the world is going to be this way forever, but you have to understand the world you are in now, for the present, and how do you work in it? And sometimes that means doing a lot of very unsavory things and talking with unsavory people. Maybe even having a slightly tarnished legacy as you leave this world to the next generation. The more I've seen, I've just studied his words. I can see it. The book that I've been playing the audiobook for, Germs, Judith Miller's Germs, okay? Joshua Lederberg, this is a book that was published, September 9th, 2001. It tells you everything about what's going to happen with with a big, large-scale anthrax attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center. It goes over all the history of the anthrax vaccines. It's all there. They knew it was going to happen. Lederberg is one of the most cited people in this book. Why is this not the book that's being used to understand 9/11? Why not use the book? Why not use this book? Why with thousands of citations? Why not use this book? Why not use this book? Why not use this book? By the way, none of these books mention Lee Harvey Oswald. So, How did I discover Joshua Lederberg? How did that come to pass? Let me go to my archive here. Joshua Lederberg's first wife, Esther Lederberg, is also, oh my goodness, another giant in the world of biology, phages, etc. It was. Find the I'm not sure I have a link to it in here. Here he is with the Ruskies. All right, so let me find another page here. There is an effort that he was part of, and it is something that's relatively unknown. It was the It's like the Future Security Working Environment. Gosh darn it, and I can't think of it right now. Was it Future Security Environment? Was it Andrew Marshall? And I think this was going to be it here. I need to make it. It needs to be easier to find. So this is an October 1988 document. The Future Security Environment. Subtitle: Report of the Future Security Environment Working Group, submitted to the Commission on Integrated Long-Term Strategy. Of course, it's a United States government document here. I'm just going to read the memorandum here. The working group on the future security environment is pleased to present our report to the Commission on Integrated Long-Term Strategy. This report is in general consonance with the Commission's report, Discriminate Deterrence, which made substantial use of our preliminary findings and conclusions. The working group report provides more comprehensive and detailed information in support of the Commission's report. Blah, 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 blah. Because a separate working group addressed things like low-intensity conflict, the report gives limited attention to smaller regional wars. So it talks about really the future security environment of the world, and for the United States, kind of a big deal. The main person who oversaw this was a man named Andrew Marshall, a very curious pick by Richard Nixon, to run a new United States military department called the Office of Net Assessment. And it was really a small think tank group that was responsible for looking at all of the existing threats and potential new threats of the future. And you could see how the threat of the perceived threat in the 1980s of both computing, artificial intelligence, and biology, the advances in microbiology, the potential to improve life, to extend life, to for countries to fight each other through germ warfare, etc., and of course all the potential that was being hyped up by what was starting to become the Human Genome Project. I don't know if it had its formal name yet, but the effort was already being thought of throughout the 1980s, although I don't think the formal title started until 1992. You could see how these are where the biggest minds are going to sit down. They're going to talk about the future security of the United States of America. Kind of a big deal. So the names of this working group here, okay, the chairman, the co-chairmen are Fred Ike and Albert J. Wohlstetter. Albert J. Wohlstetter was responsible for writing the United States nuclear weapon doctrine, and his brother Charles Wohlstetter played a big role in some of the largest telecom companies, such as that big sign behind me, GTE. GTE is connected in with a lot of the technology of long-range nuclear missiles, intercontinental missiles, and, of course, the advancement of telecommunications and network computing and so on. Members included Ambassador Armstrong, Zbigniew Brzezinski. Everyone knows Brzezinski is. At least you should know on my channel. Judge William P. Clark, General Ambassador General Andrew J. Goodpaster, Admiral James Holloway III, Professor Sam P. Huntington, Henry Kissinger, Joshua Lederberg, and General Bernard Shriver, and John Vesey. Okay, so obviously a lot of big hidden names there. And yes, one of the main members is Joshua Lederberg, a bacteriologist. So why did I even ever look at this document? Well, the main reason why I looked at this document, okay, on the future security, this is the biggest think tank, really, in the United States military, maybe even the United States government. What are the big threats of the future? It's going to be really the advancement of the understanding of genetics. And let's look at the other people here. Elliot Cohen, David Epstein, Fritz Ehrmath, Lawrence Gershwin, James McCarthy, Jeffrey Milstein, James Roche, Thomas Rosa, Stephen Rosen, Dov Zakheim, and Barbara Bixler. Now, the first thing you should notice is half of those people are often presented as insiders with respect to the events of September 11th, 2001. Matter of fact, many of them are. So many of the people that seem to be blamed, or that are blamed by the conspiracy groups, the free-thinking independent media, for responsible for the events of September 11th, 2001, are on this document. But that's not why I looked at this document. Okay, I looked at this document because I was trying to learn about this guy here, Thomas Rona. Now, Thomas Rona, last name R-O-N-A, he was a Hungarian immigrant. He came to the United States right after World War II. His wife was named Monique Rona. The word information warfare, InfoWars even, if you prefer, that word was created by Thomas Rona. But again, why did I look at this document? I looked at this document because this one guy here, who was, a pretty big hitter with respects to military intelligence and the future security of the United States, this Hungarian immigrant, his wife, Monique Rona, introduced Bill Gates, a young Bill Gates, as a teenager to Gary Kildall. That's right. One of the most important, if possibly the most important relationship or mentorship or business partnership in all of the history of computing, Bill Gates and Gary Kildall. The person that introduced those two is the wife of Thomas Rona. Now, Monique Rona was the department head at the Oceanography Institute and much of the computing resources at the University of Washington throughout the 1960s and early 1970s. And Gary Kildall even mentioned her in his uncompleted biography. One of the very few names that was mentioned in there, someone that Gary Kildall respected tremendously, was Monique Rona, the wife of Thomas Rona. Now, Monique Rona sadly died in a car accident. I think it was 1973 or 1974. I'll need to look up the exact date. She died in a car accident on a Sunday morning on a side street with a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit, and she was hit by a Marine. It's a very odd circumstances. However, it was on the morning after the wedding of her firstborn son. So she got to go to the wedding of her firstborn son on Saturday, and then on Sunday she dies in a car accident, and then most of the obituaries are erased for Monique Rona. She's just gone. Matter of fact, the only obituary that I found of use actually had her name spelled wrong, meaning that there was an intentional effort to wipe her out. So in the early pandemic days or early show days, I'm trying to learn about how the heck did this Bill Gates, who I actually think is on the spectrum, for lack another way of putting it. I suspect that Bill Gates is actually vaccine damaged. I'm just going to say it. And he can't function at a very high level without significant help. Sadly, no fault of his own, but his dad is a bit of a psycho. And Bill Gates kept being put into these positions to be suggested that he was some idiot savant or whatever, and he just wasn't. He didn't even know what utensil to use to eat chicken. That's the real Bill Gates. He's not someone that wants to kill everyone on the planet with vaccines. He just says what he's told. He's a very simple person, and it just goes to show how evil the machine is behind Bill Gates to use him like that. But while looking at the business relationships of Bill Gates and how he got to be where he was, and looking at Gary Kildall, I just stumbled upon this name Rona. Now, Thomas Rona himself, I think, died in 1993 or 94. He didn't live that long. He was also on the Office of Technology Policy, which, basically provides guidance on policy issues, which of course is going to be impacted as with the current and projected future advancements of technology. And I think he died 94 or 95. He remarried, but it's very difficult to get information about him. They had 4 kids. One of them is still a practicing doctor out in the Seattle area. But it led me to this document. So here I am looking at this document. I see a great many of the names of responsible for September 11th. Okay, as an inside job. And I see Kissinger, and I see Andrew Marshall. And by the way, Andrew Marshall was said to be by a Dr. Stephen Pachenik, a previous colleague and underling of Kissinger, to be the person that ran this whole event, this whole, unit in the military, to be one of the worst Americans, one of the worst people to ever live. So clearly, the people who are on this side of advancing knowledge of genetics, etc., they hated this person. And then I see all of these 9/11 names on here. And again, at this time, I'm certainly not in a position, there's Andrew Marshall's signature, to question 9/11. Matter of fact, at this time, I figured, something fishy going on. Look, buildings collapsed. Obviously, something bad happened. But I never really looked into the details. It was probably an inside job. I can't imagine something like that just happening coincidentally, but whatever. And then I just noticed there's one bacteriologist, Lederberg. And then I opened his page on Wikipedia, and I saw some stunning things said. And I found it to be a little bit, it was unsatisfying. How many large things were stated on his wiki page, and how short the Wikipedia page was. I learned about the possibility that many viruses, structures called viruses or phages, maybe even viruses themselves or exosomes, are part of a massive, infinitely, unimaginably complicated relationship between cells and bacterium, etc., where they're all communicating in ways which we can't even think to understand across generations of people. It's remarkable. And then I found the National Libraries of Medicine and their photo pages for Dr. Joshua Lederberg. And there he is. There's Fauci, and I realized that Lederberg then was appointed by Rumsfeld for the 9/11 internal Pentagon investigations. And I see. I look at his Nobel Prize career. Here he is. There's Lederberg to the far right, and he's one person away from JFK. Why are all these books coming out about monkeys and Oswald and Castro, when the person that was actually the lead technologist, the lead scientist working directly with JFK on issues of biotechnology was Joshua Lederberg. And he was an advisor to several other U.S. presidents. Aldous Huxley, this Future of Man conference in the 1960s, where they are talking about the future of the human race. And scientists, along with Hillary Kaprowski, Aldous Huxley, etc., they are talking about taking over the evolution of the species. That we have actually reached a point right now where technology may facilitate taking over evolution of the species. These are what the big thinkers are speculating there. Now, it's easy to dismiss as everyone who spoke there is bad. I mean, what kind of a crazy thing is that? However, if there is a potential, if there is any potential for a technology to evolve to allow central planning of the evolution of the species, I would hope that someone would be an adult enough in the room to maybe go there and realize that we live in Rome. For the moment, for the present, we live in Rome. We don't live anywhere else. You could burn Rome down, but that's not going to be good for anyone. That's actually not a good thing. We live in Rome for the moment. How do we as adults deal with this situation? And in my early days of research, I simply saw this as, Lederberg bad. But the more you listen to him, the more you realize, even when he says we need to be worried about emerging viruses or whatever. Look, eventually somebody, and maybe that next person in the line is Jonathan Cooey, has to say, look, a lot of this emerging virus stuff is nonsense. Okay, but you can't go directly to that. You need someone in the middle to provide a bridge, some clues. Right? Otherwise, you just wind up being an outsider. And I think maybe one of those people who stayed in the machine because he was so fundamental and or important with respect to some of the foundational information was Joshua Lederberg. He was the adult in the room. Even if the things he said sounded completely off the wall. And for the record, he said plenty of things that I didn't agree with. For example, in the 1960s, he was totally on board with the potential for population controls. Not necessarily from a eugenics standpoint, but concerned that there were going to be too many people. Now, maybe that was all baloney too, but, it's not like no one's born a saint, okay? We all got to go through our own growing process. But this isn't to say that everything he said is spot on. But, we've evolved. So, who's the primary signature on the 1969 Biological Weapons Convention for the United States? It's Joshua Lederberg. Everyone likes to talk about gain-of-function viruses and bioweapons. No one will mention Lederberg. Genetic engineering may control heredity. Of course, that's Lederberg. No one mentions it. When it comes to some of the biggest work in the early days of artificial intelligence, Lederberg was there. Of course, he had a pretty good relationship with the Rockefellers. probably one of the reasons why he got appointed to be the head of the Rockefeller Institute for 10 years. Margaret Thatcher, etc. He actually wound up having a great relationship with Dick Cheney. I think it was actually Lederberg playing Cheney, by the way. The power to redesign every species, eugenics. You know, everyone loves to bitch about the 1986 act, the Childhood Immunization Act. Okay. Who's sitting next to Reagan? Who signed that? It's Joshua Lederberg. Now, here's the thing. We live in Rome. Something's going to happen. There's an iceberg heading towards the boat, or the boat's heading towards the iceberg, if you prefer. He can just stand up and being like, oh, this act is terrible. Don't sign it. And then Reagan will just get shot, and it's going to happen one way or the other. Or can you be the adult in the room? And the more I've watched about Lederberg, I believe he is the adult in the room. And not only does he know a little bit about this stuff, he is the stuff. He is the guy who helped get PCR technology out there for whatever it does or doesn't do. He is the person who actually led NASA's space program with respect to exobiology. If you like Carl Sagan, who did Carl Sagan look up to when he was with NASA? Joshua Lederberg. No one mentions him. Let's get back to talking about something conspiratorial. We got to get an Epstein story in there somehow. Otherwise, it just isn't interesting. Stop wasting my time, Mark Kulak, talking about people who are adults. I want to talk about Epstein. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not giving you that. And this is why my rankings, my views are stuck where they are. And if you're watching this in earnest, you're enjoying the benefits of this. This is the real story. These are the real brains behind this. And it's not just all bad psychopaths. This is a war. There is a war happening about access to American children, the American military, about how our bodies are going to be harvested for medical experimentation. There's a war. That sounds like a big statement, but it's the truth. There is a war being fought right now, international war, about access to data, control of data, and how to use people's bodies while they are alive. You're not having a productive argument if you just say it's pharma companies wanting money, because that's just a veneer. I actually think that some of the pharma companies are just constructs that are made to make a lot of money, a few billion here or there, to get all the attention. But the intelligence war over what's going to be happening with the species is much bigger than that. Finally, with Bush, he won the medal. Recombinant DNA, working with the Russians. And this is a photo that I've misrepresented before. Lederberg had a good relationship with the Sackler family. Given the fact that we had our son die almost 3 years ago right now, I should be outraged about that, and initially I was. But now that I see that the United States Department of Justice actually went out of their way to drop investigations against the Sackler family in 2007 before the opioid epidemic really even got started, I'm now openly speculating that the Sackler family was used as part of an operation to murder enough Americans over a long period of time to first and foremost, as part of a demographic adjustment for voting purposes, but then even more so to lower life expectancy during a time where we had more old people dying, and then suggest it was a deadly novel virus. And I think that the Sackler family were set up to be fall guys for this. I won't accept an explanation that everyone was willing to stay silent so one family could kill almost 1 million people so they could make $1 billion. I won't accept that. That's a ludicrous thing to suggest. But it's being suggested right now. And similar to going silent about Lederberg, there's been nothing but, I believe eventually it's going to come out that this is how the Sackler family was used. Initially, there were, I think, more addictions. There was a concern, and they went forward with the product. And I wouldn't be surprised if internally they were probably even thinking of backing off in the product all the way back in 2007, because it was clear it was creating addictions and there were going to be more deaths from it. And then suddenly the DOJ comes in like, you guys just keep doing what you're doing. And that's how serious this is. That is why we need to accept the fact that we need adults, because we are in Rome. We are in a world where Americans will be mass murdered in order to create narratives and advance this unshakable belief that we are going to figure out how life works. This is Rome, and we are in Rome at the present. And it'd be nice if suddenly that wasn't the case, I guess, but that's exactly where we're at. This is where we're at right now. So now I look back. I look for the Lederbergs. Who are the adults who are willing to be in unsavory situations? How many times when Lederberg says the virus is the greatest threat, was he really trying to say that the use of virology is going to be the greatest threat to humankind? I know it gets blurry sometimes. And then, right around the time of 9/11, suddenly you could see he's developing relationships with Giuliani and so on. So it kind of makes sense that he would have been appointed. Yeah, Danzig, of course, that he would have been pulled in. So I've used Lederberg as the fact that so many of his videos have been. It's actually very hard to find videos of audio of him. I've had to dig hard. Videos of audio or just the audio, much less video of him speaking for anything more than just like a minute is very hard. How is one of the most important people in the last 100 years of U.S. history almost shadowed? I don't know. I shouldn't say. The fact that it's happening is meaningful, and it should be meaningful to you too. So what's going to be happening now is finally someone else has seen the light. Someone who works really hard and wants to get it right. Someone who I trust in as much as anyone right now. And I'm thankful for Jonathan Cooey to realizing this. Looking at the older books, looking at the older biology, because it's still the same biology. It's not like we've changed. It's just the way it's been represented or misconstrued has evolved, and it's gotten much, much worse. And I hope, well, I've made the decision, and I guess I'm going to die on this hill, that I'm going to stick with the concepts and the technologies and the people that are most, that my research just keeps going back to as the most important people in U.S. history of the last 50 or 100 years of U.S. history, the meaningful U.S. history. And the more that I see, speculation about, JFK and Castro and Oswald popping up in books, the more obvious it is that's those are jokes. That's all distractions that's put out there. What you need to know is pretty much what I've just gone over here. And I think Lederberg knew this. And the more people would go over the life history of Lederberg, the more that they are going to have a more accurate, grounded, realistic interpretation of the events over the last, 50, 60, 70 years, including including but definitely not limited to 9/11. I started off on this venture wanting to understand and highlight the severity of the drug epidemic in the United States, of chronic illness, Lyme disease. My understanding of that has changed also a lot. It's evolved, as it should have. And this should be a helpful review, because now you can understand why these books that we're talking about the possibility of a biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center, and how they hyper-focus on vaccines and anthrax vaccines, involve so many citations of Joshua Lederberg. And the date of September 11th, coincidentally, was said to be an inside job by many of the same people that were on that same document that I found Joshua Lederberg's name on as the leading biologist, spearheaded by Andrew Marshall, and also with Thomas Rona on the board. So that's kind of just a review of my research and how I got here. So you'll see as Cooey goes over the science of Lederberg, you're going to hear Lederberg's name mentioned in all these books, and you're going to see how incredible it is that September 11th, 2001, one of the most central people is a bacteriologist who's also going to help us see the science as it is, the biology as it is, and not the mythology of it. So, there you go. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you to the late Joshua Lederberg. And I think that's my little show for today. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for listening. Be well. Be peaceful. God bless. Oh, yeah. One more thing. At 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and make sure I got the time right here, Children's Health Defense has a show coming up today. And make sure I got the time right. Called The Home Birth Experience. 6 p.m. Eastern Time. The Home Birth Experience today on Children's Health Defense. They're going to have a guest on talking about the miracle of a home birth. So you might see me in the chat telling everyone that how healthy Brandy Vaughn's child was, who was a home birth, and how healthy he was and is, presumably, because she made a decision to not give him any intramuscular injections. And rest in peace, Brandy Vaughn. Too bad that Children's Health Defense can't even spell the name right of Brandy Vaughn, and their very sad memorial page for her, which isn't even really a memorial page, even though she did so much for them and said it right. Anyways, you might see me in the chat there in another hour or two, or not. Love you guys.